afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming to the combat panel for powers and how we make them. And this is going to be kind of cool. So for the first time ever in SOE Live history, we're going to kind of pull back the curtain and reveal to you guys how it is we actually make the powers in DC Universe Online, and kind of also talk a little bit about the iterative process of how we come up with a cool new idea, and we work with our gameplay engineers here to make that happen. That leads to more new ideas, and the whole thing kind of springboards and snowballs with itself. My name's Mark Hallish. I've been with SOE for a long time. I was on the original EverQuest. I was on Star Wars Galaxies, and I joined the DC team pretty early on in development as the lead combat designer, and promoted to lead designer of all systems shortly after, a little bit after release. You know me as Tunso on the board, and if you didn't know, DCUO is an action combat MMO, of course. We fight with and against your favorite DC villains like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and for millions and millions of console players, this is their first MMO. So what are we going to talk about today? So first, I'm going to couple seconds here. We're going to turn it over to Lars Smith, who's our lead gameplay engineer, Arzinho on the boards. And he's going to talk about our abilities and how our tech works, and show you guys some of our custom tools that we use. And then I'm going to grip control back and talk a little bit about history of powers and the tech that we used or that we had at launch of the game, and sort of how cover some of the DLCs and stuff leading up to that. And then Sport is going to take over. Jesse Scott, he's a systems designer. And we're going to zoom in a little bit and talk about, he's going to talk about celestial powers. And what's interesting about that is, well, he's going to talk about the initial design concept and sort of the decisions he made when he was developing Celestial. And then we're going to turn it over to Ben Jackson. You know him on boards as Negative Mass. He's a gameplay engineer. And he's going to tell you about the tech that we use to develop the celestial power. And then I'm going to kind of wrap up with talking about race powers. And what's interesting about race powers is they actually use exactly the same tech as the celestial powers do. You'll kind of see that as part of the theme here, is how making smart choices in tech and reuse and whatnot is a great way to go. And I want to steal Lars' thunder by talking about the things he wants to talk about. So I will now present to you Lars Smith, the gameplay engineer.
I was on the gameplay team prior to launch. Like Tunso, I was promoted to lead gameplay shortly after launch. Let's talk about the ability system and sort of where our thought process were. Prior to coming to SOE, I worked at EA, and while I was at EA, I worked on another DC game. I was on the Superman Returns team for the movie, because movie games are fun. And we dealt with a lot of the same problems. We were an open world game, we were action combat, we were that kind of console brawler that everyone knows. So it was interesting making the transition from that team to this team. We were talking about abilities and powers. So really quick, what is an ability? Well, really ability is like everything you do, right? So it's everything that you use from your combat tray. It's every time that you swing your weapon and do a kick in martial arts. It's sort of every time you change roles and you get your tank buffs or your controller buffs, those are coming off of a different type of ability. Every time you drink a cola, use a trinket, it's all this kind of stuff. So how can you make these abilities? And kind of thinking about this, we have about two different philosophies, let's say. One of which is sort of hand-coding. So maybe scripting, that might be another way to describe it. So, and this is actually the approach we took on Superman Returns, where we used a scripting language called Lua, and we very customly said, these are the animations, these are the particle effects, these are what happens to the other NPCs that you're fighting. And that can lead to some pretty cool stuff, and it's actually a pretty common approach that you see on consoles. A different approach you can take is to do things more modular, so you can sort of define like Legos, building blocks. You can say, I'm going to do damage. And you come up with a way of just like, I'm just going to do damage. Or I'm going to do a knockback. All it does is knock the guy away and have it. So, you know, when you're looking at this, you know, pros and cons of it. So like I said, when you're handwriting it, when you have total control over it, you know, you can get really unique behavior. You can get exactly what you want. And that's really nice when you're sort of building a small set of really focused powers. So when you're dealing with Superman's heat vision, you want it to be exactly like this, or his blow breath, and you're just, you know, knocking everybody away. From the modular side, what you get is, and Halish mentioned this briefly, is you get interactions with things that you didn't really think about. So when you build a whole bunch of little Legos, you don't really know what can be built with them. You have to give them to somebody that really wants to build them, assemble them, put them together, and then they come back and say, look what I did, and you go, I don't know how you did that. And then they show you, and you're like, that's pretty crazy. Bad side of the hand coding is it can be a lot more work. You know, you have to either have designers that you really trust to be scripters, or you give it over to programming side and you know give them that level of stuff. It can be harder to balance, you know, because if it's all being driven out of script, do I have to go update 1,500 script files because I want to reduce the damage of melee punch, which, you know, on the modular side, it becomes harder to sort of make unique things. You know, when you've got so many Legos and bricks, they're all squarish, say. You know, they're all built in similar ways, so you can't really make a sphere. You know, it becomes a little bit more involved in building them and in setting them up. You'll see this. So, just for an example, I mean, this is actually out of our tool. This is the Hand Blast Melee's primary attack. Right? So every time that you hit punch, this is sort of the idea of what they're doing. So on the very beginning of this is where we'll define it out as an ability. So that's what we're using here in this setup is these modular graphical tools. That ability, when it fires, will fire off delivery mechanisms. We'll touch on that briefly, but a delivery mechanism here is like a ray. So this literally uses Havoc and says, I'm going to shoot a ray straight out from the attack, and it's going to see what does it hit. Right? And that's pretty much the primary goal of all delivery mechanisms. What did I hit? On the result of what did I hit, we're going to see what do I do. So in this case, it's a juggle, right? So it's kind of going to suspend them up into the air, hold them up there. It's also going to apply a tag, which we'll touch on what tags and why they're important, what they bring to the combat system. So those are the first things that are going to be, basically that's going to be what you're aiming at, what your target is. In addition to that, you're going to fire a cone, so a directed sort of projection out from you, and that is going to do impulse. Basically, we're an action game and we have some physics, so it's really fun to knock stuff around. So every time you do an attack, we're going to be knocking whatever we can around, and we're going to hurt a bunch of guys. So on the pool side here, that's health pool, power pool, whatever we can do. So we touched on these big concepts, or individual concepts here. So delivery mechanism, sort of. What am I talking about here? Like I said, it's what do I hit? So we use a couple of different sort of grouping, some big ideas on this. So we either do things based on shapes. So we can fire out a ray, we can fire a sphere bubble around you, we can fire out a cone, we can do boxes. So again, all of these are going to use Havoc, and they're going to use those kinds of spatial queries to identify what your attack is doing and where it's at. Sometimes we talked about when it's harder to customize, you can see telekinesis was a power that we really loved, but was pretty problematic for a long time because we couldn't really identify the best targets for telekinesis, things that you could actually move with your mind. And at the end of the day, that became its own custom. There's a delivery mechanism that all it is it's a type of sphere with a whole bunch of logic in it to find things that will move, things that maybe aren't quest objectives, things to make it actually cool. So the other thing we can do is sort of define things not by the shape and the Havoc, but more directed. So in this case, self. Like self is you. Self is anything that we tell a passive buff. That's just going to use self. Target is who you're aiming at. Pets, and sometimes pets will come back to you. People in your group. lists, that we'll touch on that later. Lists are generated by procs, and we can get into that. So after the delivery mechanism is fired, say I'm going to do this attack, I've hit out my ray, and I've got my particular target, and I've done my cone, and I have the 3 or 4 people that are in that, and I'm going to apply these delivery mechanisms, which apply these game effects, and I'm getting my terms crossed. So a game effect, like I said, what does it do? Again, when I was trying to take this huge list of game effects that we've come up with over the years, and see if there's anything that sort of comes out as groups and ideas on that. So combat state. So in this case, we're talking about pool, which again is anytime I'm going to affect your health, doing damage or healing. I'm going to affect your power pools or your supercharged pools. Stuns, which is all over the place again, which is really harsh penalty, right? I'm going to stop you from moving. I'm going to stop you from attacking. There's nothing you can do about it for a certain amount of time. Combat mechanics, well, to counter the stun, we needed the breakout. Again, this whole category of things where we identify needs of how to keep this balanced, but it's not really affecting, the character in that much of a way. Sometimes we need them for messaging. So every time you're doing an attack, we actually have a special application of game effect for the combo counter. So that's popping, incrementing all the time on your client in that way. We also do things in physics. So we do knockbacks and we do the knockdowns. And we do the things that sort of launch you around in our Havoc world. Sometimes it's not the combat guys that need a game effect. Sometimes it's Jesse and the design guys in the back. So we can have a game effect that does the zone. We don't have to use this all the time. When you're using a teleporter, we don't have to do this. But when you're doing particular content and maybe we want to just magically warp you around, or if you use a vault ticket, actually, the vault ticket consumable is a zone. So tools of the trade there. Sometimes we need to transform your character. Stealth in that way is considered a type of transformation. Going to make you invisible, going to keep you off of mini maps, going to keep you doing all this. And here's just the full range of them. I mean, there's a lot, and there's even more I didn't put on the slide because it was too much. But these are the types of things that we do, and a lot of this comes down to what makes sense at the time, what can be built or what can't be built, and then what system are they trying to build. It's like, this is awful. Let's make a game effect. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And the best part about it is actually because of the different areas that game effects come from, can be applied pretty much from any ability, and therefore anything, any player, any NPC, any systems that we can sort of fire abilities from. When we make it a game effect, it opens it up for use so many places in the game, not just in the moment-to-moment action. It makes it really great. But at the end of the day, when we got through to the launch window, or we're trying to get up to launch, and Halish is building the powers, we had to look at that and say, is that enough? Like, can we actually build what we're trying to do? And the answer is that there was actually missing a couple of key elements inside of the game effects system themselves that weren't really just their own game effect, and needed to be things that like all game effects could do. No matter what we're trying to do, we can't, in addition to do a couple of different things. One is tagging. So tagging is, which we saw in the first slide, tagging is just a way of putting labels on a guy. It's a way of saying, like, when you're standing in fire, you're burning. When you are getting knocked down, sometimes that's going to be a label to show, like, well, you've been locked up enough. Maybe we're going to give you a window of immunity to that. So you can label a bunch of things, but it's not good putting, a hashtag I'm on fire on a guy if you can't actually look at it and read it. So predicates are a way to read them. We use an XML based setup, but it's basically, you can do very simple logic. And you can say, is this guy, does he have this tag? And does he have this tag? And does he have this tag? And you can do these kinds of combinations. And we use these in the game effect side as a way of saying, well, if this is happening on this guy and I'm attacking him, put this game effect on him. And if it's not, put a different game effect on him. So that way, as you're doing sort of consecutive attacks where multiple people are doing these attacks on you, we get these kind of interactions between the powers, between the game effects. And in addition to that, we needed procs. Procs, which will be defined pretty shortly, they're a way of a bunch of events have happened, and now let's chain into the next thing. Let's do something else. So, you know, I got hit, this is what happens. I got killed, this is what happens. Or I killed a guy, or whatever. Right? And now, you know, that was really something that Halish was bringing to the table from his experience on EQ and on SWIG, which didn't really come up a whole lot when I was on Superman. Like, the guy, he just used heat vision on me, it just does this, right? Why should I don't have to guess at what else might be happening when I build this other stuff into it. But, you know, he's coming to the table saying, I can do all this stuff, but here's all the stuff that I can't do, that I'm used to doing, that we've done a lot of cool stuff with, so why not? And when we sit down, we go, I don't know why not. Let me figure that out. And that's where, you know, that starts to feed the loop. So Halish will come up with, I need this, and then I'll go, why? And it'll say, I'll need this because it'll be, you know, A, B, and C. And they also think about it and be like, okay, yeah, I can see A, B, and C, but have you thought about D? And have you thought about E? And if I give you not the thing that you're asking for, a lot of times I don't give them what they ask for. I hopefully, in my mind, is I give them what they want. You know, I give, it's what can I do that gives you the tools to build what you want, but it's so much bigger behind the scenes that as you start playing with it, as he starts building powers with it, all of a sudden, he can start doing a whole lot of stuff that he hadn't thought about doing before. And then it comes back and it just keeps going and going and going. Or if he builds a bunch of stuff with, like we talked about, the big Lego bricks, if he takes 500 bricks to build one tool, why don't I just make a brick that's that size and shape, and then you can just use that over and over, and that really feeds into this loop. So now we kind of got into ideas of where we were at and what we were going for. We'll let Halish go back and sort of fill in the gaps for what he did going into launch with these tools.
Yeah, really, what Lars is saying is that I told him an idea that his idea is usually better. As far as just a better way to implement it. So, yeah, like Lars said, when in the initial development of DC, basically one of the first pieces of tech I asked for were tags and predicates. So tags and predicates more or less gave us everything we needed to do to more or less make all of the launch powers, so, you know, fire and ice, gadgets, mental, nature, and sorcery. So pretty much everything from, you know, from your pheromones to your, you know, ice armor, burning, pretty much everything that happens power interaction wise, like some pretty complex behaviors are all done with tags and predicates, and that actually even includes the counter system. It's all done with those 2 or 3 pieces of tech, more or less tags, predicates, and procs. After we launched, more or less, we continued forward. Basically, we used new tech to basically create new things, obviously, right? So in September 2011, Fight for the Light launched with light powers, and that lets you combo trade powers. That was actually something we were able to do prior to launch, so we kind of held that one back to show after we'd released. But that followed very quickly with Lightning Strikes, and that introduced the idea of reactive healing, which was an extension of the way we do procs. Battle for Earth introduced remote damage absorption, so that's more or less what Brick does. And June 2012, we had The Last Laugh that introduced Shield, and that sort of introduced the idea of more natural flow between taps and holds. Hand of Fate gave us the utility belt, which not necessarily game effect related, but was great for exploding the number of trinkets and consumables you're able to use. Because I mean, you know, the problem, of course, is like I had the soda cola. That is the best thing I can put in my consumable, you know, my consumable slot. So why would I ever do anything else? Obviously, utility belt was added to help with that situation. Home Turf obviously introduced the lair and the mainframe and everything having to do with that, so that was another huge addition. And what's interesting is the relationship between the utility belt and the lair is, and we could have a whole talk about this, is just the idea of traits. But that was all traits. And we could, I shouldn't even mention it, but yeah, trains are another huge thing. It's another huge part of our systems and our game. Anyway, that led to Origin. Yeah, next year we'll go here. That led to Origin Crisis, right? And Origin Crisis had Quantum. Quantum had teleportation and time freeze effects. So that was a few new pieces of tech we had. And that itself led to Celestial, which was released with Sons of Trigon. That had health transfer and deploy on KO, followed by War of the Light, which had rage powers, berserker style, damage control, and finally Amazon Fury, which had weapon mastery that lets you combo with multiple weapons. So covering all that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse Scott now. He's going to tell you all about his work with Celestial.
So, who's played Celestial? All right, good number of you guys. So a few of these slides, you guys will already kind of understand how this works, but I want to tell you, okay, so first I'll tell you kind of how I got started with DCUO. I started out in QA. We were testing in beta, but it was closed beta at the time. I was only there 2 months, and I got moved up to design. We were helping the environment art team to place out all the props, everything you can pick up and smash, and kind of like proof objects. You smash them with metal flies everywhere, placing those everywhere. And then I was like, you know what? I want to do that stuff that Tunso's doing. I want to help out with those powers, man. So they were like, you know what? He could use some help there because it's too much to do. So that's when I started kind of helping out there, and when electricity came around, that's when I started really working heavily with making new stuff. So with Celestial, we start out with any power stuff. We start out kind of like high-level stuff. We go sit down with Jens, Jesse, SJ, Hallish, and kind of say, okay, what's coming up? What kind of thing are we trying to do? Which, as you heard in the keynote earlier, is going to kind of change, so we can slightly not have to theme everything specific together. But in this case, we were trying to fit the theme of Sons of Trigon, which was kind of a light versus dark, kind of a holy, unholy, and a high-level kind of concept. Kind of like Raven has the two sides, right? So we wanted to do that. We needed it to be a healer and DPS role, which made sense. We wanted to use superpower comboing, but in a slightly different way, right? We had done light at this point, which had superpower comboing. The superpower comboing using a tray ability, using some sort of input, and then going into another superpower version of it, not a weapon attack. But we wanted to do a little different. Hallish's particular request, he wanted it to have a somatic component, right? Yeah. Like a hand gesturing kind of a thing, like you're casting the spells based on your movements. And it's like, how are we going to do that in DCUO, right? To me, it sounded like a lot of animations. So, the problem was, we were out of animation memory, PS3. And it also, I actually sat down and started prototyping and putting these things together and just taking animations that I've seen in the game and trying to fit them together. And then our lead animator, when he was playing these prototypes that I had, he was like, I don't even know when I'm finishing the thing that I did, much less knowing whether I got to the end point to the combo off. So in the end, we ended up with one animation for multiple reasons. It allowed, which was the kind of pulling all this awesome power in, right? Before you go to the next power. We ended up with one because you could tell what you're doing. You were going inward, right? You knew you were doing something instead of I'm doing something with someone else, so it was a great messaging. And then it freed up a lot of extra effects that would be, because anything that was special in between there, you're not actually doing any of the damage and stuff, so it would almost not necessarily be a wasted effect, but kind of like no real payoff for the effects guys to be making individual things. Then the two things that I really wanted to make the set kind of come together and be unique and different from everything else was the health transfer mechanic and on KO mechanic. And then we were able to kind of tie this Sons of Trigon theme, the light, the dark, the opposites, right, into the tree design, which was your blessed tree and your cursed tree in multiple ways. With the blessed tree, it does burst damage or burst healing, right? The cursed tree is over time, heals or damage over time. So opposites, right? As opposed to just having a tree that was completely opposite. So one tree heals, one tree damage. That'd be kind of weird. Didn't like that idea. So the other way was they're exact mirrors for multiple reasons. With all the things combined together, if Smite combos to Haunt, it would be easiest if you could find them in trees, because you're going to have to go read both descriptions, right? Combo either direction, and but you have to go look up in the other trees. So it was best if they were kind of both in the same spot, right? Just kind of bring all the different things from the 5 things that we really want to get in there all together. And you can see where it says Celestial Combos. You tap melee, you hold range, you get the abilities. And the idea to continue with the theme of keeping the light, the dark, I'm supercharging myself, right? I'm getting a lot of power out of this, right? There's the in-between animation that doesn't do anything, but you can see, here we go, right? You're going from blessed to cursed, or it's like this, right? You go admonish, you gather up all that blessed energy, and then you use that with a cursed ability, and the cursed ability now becomes cleansed, so you're not only doing a lot of damage, or a lot of the blight in this case. It's not just doing what it did before, but you're adding to it. You're adding the blessed side of that, which also ties in with the theme again, which was kind of, if you have to have both abilities in order to pass together. And that was because you needed to know, like, how could you cleanse something if you didn't even know how it worked, kind of thing, right? So we kept that theme going along with it. And then, of course, you can come from the other direction, too. If you start with Blight, and you charge in all that cursed energy, then whenever you combo Admonish, you end up with a corrupted version of it. So, at that point, we fit the theme, we hit the DPS part, we hit the power combos, all that stuff. We had a ton of abilities created because we had all the transition ones in between and the actual abilities. But then we didn't have the health transfer mechanic or the on-KO mechanic yet. But we were still working on it. So, in the docs that I had written up, this was my original tech request for getting them to get us a health transfer. And it's literally like just a couple lines, right? That can turn into all kinds of work for an engineer, but that's all I have to write down. And as long as they understand it, right? Although y'all probably came over with a few questions, right?
A few.
Yeah. And then I had this new game project that fires on KO, even shorter, but it's kind of awesome. And so Ben is going to tell you, his plight of trying to make these awesome things happen.
Hi, my name is Ben Jackson. I'm a Yale engineer. I post as Negative Mass on forums. I joined the DC team about 5 years ago or so, and I was really interested in the action combat kind of game, so this totally fit what I was doing. So let's talk about it. Now that Jesse started to talk about what we want to do from a perspective on making Celestial sort of really an interesting and unique power, how do we make the tech to actually do that? So, as Lars mentioned, Pool is this game effect that we have that can modify how much health you have, how much power we have, or supercharge. So we needed to transfer these Pool things from one entity to another. And so what we did is we're going to build on the proc game effect, which is sort of allows us to do conditional kinds of stuff. And we'll go into more detail about that. And then the deploy on KO, the whole goal of that is so that you can have an entity deploy something when they get knocked out. And it's just, it has to be a characteristic of our game that when something is knocked out, we can't do anything else, even activate more abilities. So we had to resolve that. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a personal story. EverQuest was my first MMO, and I actually played on launch day, and it was a mess. I remember like just trying to make your first character. I think I got logged out 2 or 3 times in character create because it was taking so long. And my PC wasn't even powerful to run that. I had to borrow a friend's PC, and we huddled around his computer, made a character, got to wander out this new 3D world, and it was an amazing experience, and I really enjoyed it. And I learned many things in that MMO, and one thing I learned was this concept of proc. And I know a lot of other games use it, and I think it may have an origin that's even older than EverQuest 1. But it was this idea that you could have a chance of something to happen, this sort of secondary effect, so that there was almost like a little bit of gambling or something going on there. And that's a really important tool that we could use so that you could get some kind of neat effects out of it. So when it came up in the development process of DC before we launched, where we needed this sort of concept, I said, well, we have to make it. And since I got a chance to make that tech, I called it proc in honor of what EverQuest did. And so it's kind of a really neat way of sort of the game player getting a chance to become a game developer and take what they learned from one perspective using the other. And it was kind of a fun personal story for me. And then today, even about 15% of the abilities you use as a player across all the different power types actually use proc. It's a pretty useful tool that we have. Okay, so how do we do this pull transfer? So I'm going to start from the way that proc works. And what it's going to do is it's going to accumulate these pull changes. So it's going to recognize when your character or the character where this proc is limiting is when they lose health or something, depending upon the designer and how they set that up. And it's going to remember that amount. And then it's going to use that amount when it deploys something else that it wants to do. So you can kind of damage one and heal another. So it also remembers who contributed, and we'll show an example of how that works, so that you can deploy back to the people who contributed. And this, besides being able to use in Celestial, it actually resolves some problems that we had in some existing abilities. And so we go right back to those contributors. All right, so here's a simple example. We have Fate and we have Wonder Woman in this imaginary example where they're fighting against Circe. So Fate casts an ability, uses a cone delivery mechanism, and he hits Circe with it. And he leaves a proc on her. And that proc is going to listen to health changes that happen to Circe. So Fate and Wonder Woman each do 10 damage to Circe. She has lost 20 health from the start of that fight. And the proc is listening to that, so it remembers the 20. And then at some point later, it takes that 20 damage and converts it into 20 healing, splits it up, and sends it back to both Fate and Wonder Woman, because those are the contributors that attacked Circe in the beginning. Does this make sense to everybody? So this was a high-level concept of how we're going to do this. This is an example of, in this case, it's Celestial Curse Malediction, the non-combo version. And this is a part of what that ability actually does in our editor. Briefly, it's on the far left side, there's a ray delivery mechanism that's trying to hit whatever your primary target is. It leaves a game effect proc on them that lives for 12 seconds in this case. And then it's going to accumulate the health changes that happens and keep track of the list of who contributed to the health loss of the person who has it. And then when it finally deploys, it's going to go back to the list of people who contributed. And then on the far right, you can see there are 3 potential game effects. And this just shows kind of another way that we use our system. The top one is what it does if you're a DPS role. The middle one is what you do if it's a hero role. And the bottom one is healer if they're debuffed. And we often do this kind of thing. And there would be different predicates on there to say, in this situation, I want to behave this way. This situation would behave another. But the actual numbers of like how much it actually does is dependent upon how much damage you do in that process. And that was the big key that we wanted to do for Celestial. So the last piece of the puzzle that we had for it was this concept of deploy on knockout. I don't have an empty graph for it, unfortunately, but from high level, it's pretty simple. It's just that each entity that we have, you as your representation of the world, your player character, and every NPC, they do their own deploying and delivery mechanisms, and they handle the management of that. And it's just the nature of how our system is architected. But the problem is, if you have a knocked out character or you're deleted off the server as an NPC, you can no longer deploy things. So we never really could have that idea of you could leave some kind of curse on someone, and then when you knock them out, you get some, like a pinata opens, and you get some cool stuff out of it. So the idea was we'd leave an entity in the world, and then what we could do is request, hey, I'm going away. I'm being knocked out, but I need to do this thing, so I'm going to hand it off to you and have this other entity deploy the delivery mechanism for us. And that was our solution. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Tunso, and we're going to talk about rage.
Woo! Rawr! Rawr! So let's talk a little bit about rage power development. So, believe it or not, we are human beings, and we eat very often, at least once a day at lunch. So one day, Sport and I we went to Mighty Fine. Was it Mighty Fine? Yeah, we're eating burgers at Mighty Fine, and I believe I had a chocolate shake, and he tried it. It was quite delicious. But of course, we were talking about games we were playing at the time, and he was, I don't even remember what game it was he was telling me about. Is like, yeah, I'm playing this character, and like as I take damage, I can turn that into like power that I can use to like smash guys and stuff. And we were talking about that, and all of a sudden my head like, so I was like, wait a minute, we could probably just use the tech that you're using for Celestial and do something like, I don't know, you can like take damage and then like heal back as you get it, and then that's more or less that conversation over lunch turned into to the idea for how we would do rage. So the thing about the systems team is we do everything that's not content. So that's pretty much everything else, and we're very often under heavy load, and so the interesting thing about that time is like not only were we getting ready to launch Sons of Trigon. Of course, Jesse was heavily in development with Celestial, dealing with there's new tech and trying to get everything working. At the same time, we're also starting the PS4 launch initiative too. So there was a lot of stuff going on. So rather than basically, he more or less didn't have time to start working on the next power. So I more or less. Headed up the design and implementation of Rage, more or less because I had like, it was all, after that first couple conversations about it, it was all finished in my mind. I just had to get it out there. So more or less I'm going to talk a little bit about how the same technology we used for Celestial turned into Rage, and particularly the Rage mechanic. So what we're looking at here is Relentless Anger kind of zoomed out, and actually, believe it or not, this is a pretty tame ability, mainly because if you can see it, there's just one, I guess would be the second to the left delivery mechanism there is just a cell, so this is all just happening to you, there's nothing else going on outside, but this is Relentless Anger, like which is one of the powers that you would probably use if you were tanking or whatever. You pop that, and then basically all the damage you take over time is going to be healed back once a second, and then after 8 seconds, you're going to take all that damage back unless you do something to prevent it. So let's zoom in a little bit, and we can look at the first part of this. There's really two parts to the Rage mechanic. One is an accumulator proc that Ben just told us about, and one of them that over an 8-second period, it's just paying attention to all the damage you're taking. It's just counting that up. And what it's going to do is after 8 seconds, it's just you're going to hit yourself with it, right? And so that's, you see, there's actually five other potential. Well, there's 4 potential outcomes that could happen, and then the 5th game effect there is just the effects. The second part of this is, I'm sorry, you know what, this is actually the heal. So what is actually happening here is every 1 second, all the damage you take is either, is basically healed back. And there's variations more or less whether or not you're a tank or a non-tank, so that if you are a tank, you're causing more hate, generating more hate. The one thing you're not seeing here is like when you click on one of these boxes, there is a giant properties window of a gazillion different things. So anyway, that's the healing portion of Relentless Anger, and the damage backlash is more or less after the 8 seconds is up. It's going to check what predicates you have on there. So when you do a rage combo, it's basically putting a predicate on you, or putting a tag on you for a split second that says, "Hey, I'm doing a rage combo." And so if you're doing a rage combo and this proc, when this proc fires after 8 seconds, it's going to check what you're doing, and if you're doing a rage combo, it's not going to do any of this, right? It's just going to play actually, it's not even going to play the effects here. If you happen to be doing a half damage, like one of the fields or one of the powers that reduces the damage, then it's going to come through and look at one of the half damage game effects there, and it's going to apply that one. And then if you're not doing any of those, then you're going to take full damage. So basically, a bunch of predicates that are evaluating the state of your character and determining whether or not you die. And so to kind of demonstrate this in a way that's a little more hopefully understandable, let's imagine you're Atrocitus and you're fighting up against the Saint Walker there, right? And you're all like, "Ah, Atrocitus, and I just use roll to the sinker." And you put those procs on you, and so obviously those are the two procs we're just looking at there, right? There's one that's basically every 1 second trying to heal you back, and then another one that every 8 seconds is going to try to take that same damage and nail it back at you. So Saint Walker's all like, "Rah, 10 damage." And Atrocitus is like, "I took 10 damage." And the two procs are like, "You took 10 damage." And they record that, right? And then 1 second later, the heal proc goes, "Hey, I'm going to heal you for 10 damage," and then it empties its load, and we're kind of left at this state. And Saint Walker, again, he's like, whacks in the face for 10, you take 10 damage, both the procs record that you've taken 10 damage, and the heal goes, bam, let's heal you back for 10, right? And then some 8 seconds later, the damage backlash goes off and nails you for 20, unless you did something to either prevent it or take less damage from it. So that in a nutshell is how we basically use one piece of technology to make two completely different power sets that don't play anything like each other, but yet they're using the same underlying technology. And there's probably about a dozen other things we can do with that. But that's the wonderful part about the ability component model, right? It is multiplicative with itself, right? So any new piece of technology we get basically is potentially exponential with all the other previous pieces of technologies that we have. So that's probably the biggest reason why the ability component model is so awesome, right? And so just a few simple workhorse components like we talked about, like the proc and the tag and the predicate, allows to do a lot of really robust things for and can really make a lot of stuff for you guys. And so we can't always do. I like to believe I can do everything with tags and predicates. I still believe that, but it's not actually true. And so sometimes we do actually have to ask for new tech. And like I just said, asking for new tech, it's exponential with itself. So anyway, so that's pretty much what we had to present to you guys today. And so we're more than willing to talk about any questions you guys might have on any subjects. So anybody?
When you guys are designing your characters, as we've come along, each of the new power sets in the last 3 had some sort of precision-based combo mechanism. Are you guys preferring to have that because it's cool, or is it just that it's something that's just working within the thematic of the power set itself?
Yeah, so basically, part of that is, so we launched with Light, that was a controller, right? And then we pulled out with, came out with Celestial, obviously, which was a healer, and then we basically needed a tank, right? So that's sort of why, because we wanted to get a combo power representative for each of the roles, more or less. So that's why that is. You could probably expect munitions to be more mic-based. That's part of the advanced mechanic initiative is a lot of those are as you've seen are mic-based, right? So this is not to say we'll never do a combo power again, but more or less we wanted to at least have a combo power that fit each role. And now having done that, we can explore other avenues and stuff. Sork?
How does things like dots not stacking with each other, or two power sets competing with a PI or something like that kind of factor into everything that's been described here?
Yeah, so that actually, there's a piece of technology that comes, what's that? In the Yeah, so yes, stack groups, right, is what you're talking about. So stack groups, we can use that to basically say, this game effect blows away this other game effect, or we can basically, our options are basically to blow away the game effect if the stack rank is higher than the one that's coming in. So let's imagine, let me give you an example of this. You have, I don't know, that's a great idea.
Number 5 in the backlog.
Huh?
It's number 5.
Number 5. Okay, long story short, number 5 in the backlog is dealing with that problem, right? So what we have right now is like if we have a damage over time effect in one stack group and another one comes in, it's just going to replace, right? That's basically all we can do. We can say it replaces, basically it comes in, stomps it out. It doesn't hit at all because it's too low, or it just replaces. But with these guys, as soon as they get to it, which is actually hoping soon, it is a problem that we hate just as much as you do, because it kind of hamstrings us, right? It kind of sucks to be like, well, we already have a nature guy, so we take 2 of them, or the same thing with like anybody who's really dependent on dots, right? Nature, electricity, even 2 sorcery guys. Right, it's not like you can have two circles of protection or destruction. So we will very soon. Oh, I don't want to say very soon, but soon.
Yeah, soon.
It is on the backlog, and it will come.
Are those a type of tag, or is that something completely different from tag?
It's a property of game effects. Right?
Yeah,
So it's another.
It's actually completely different from tags. I guess it could be considered a special type of tag.
Forgot we have shirts to give away. Who wants a shirt?
But to clear it out, because a stack and what we're talking about, where it's a type of tag with priority, right? So as Howard was saying, it can stomp, or it can be consumed, or it can be blocked by existing game effects that they're currently running. So it's going to identify itself as I belong in this group, and I'm priority 1, or sometimes usually priority 1,000, because it's the most important thing ever. But they're kind of independently set up.
All right.
Just going off what Source said, back after launch, some powers were always stacking like 2 trolls in pot, or you get multiple circles down closely. I'm just wondering what happened to that.
So one of the deals with that basically is if something can stack, if something doesn't have a stack group, it will stack infinitely with itself. So what we don't want to do is create a situation where you can just like keep casting the same damage over time over and over and over and over and over again, having a stack with itself just from you. But having a stack from different players is all right? We would be fine with that. We just don't, we can't allow this. That would be overpowered if we let this.
The only way we have to stop that is just really long cooldowns, and you don't want that either.
Yeah, that's not ideal either. That was a good question. Come get it. Come get a shirt.
Yeah, well.
All right. To the back, Mr. Trinket.
Hey, I can remember right before Rage went on live, and it was on the test server. I can remember Cristiano was practicing on the test dummies and making himself die with it.
Oh, right, yeah.
How important is it for like examples like that for us players to find on the test server for you guys to go in and make changes? And does that throw a wrench in your plans for releasing stuff?
No, it is super important to get test center feedback. I mean, basically, 200 people on test center is going to find way more than we're able to find in our internal testing. So it is super helpful because you guys find hopefully the nasty stuff before we go live with the power. But that actually was one of the funnier ones. Of like, yeah, this is hey Lars, this could happen.
Well, we test things. A lot of times, what we test are the specific things that were sort of the intended use for it, and we try to test like other cases too. But there's so many permutations of different ways you can use abilities or different kinds of equipment that you put together, and so the community as a whole is really great for that. And you find all kinds of bugs
Or just things we forgot, like the gadgets update that's on there right now. The two new paralytic guard EU peoples, those shouldn't, they should be excluded from weapon mastery. Got to do that, so nobody's on that.
And not that we don't love the trinket shirt, but you can tell what you're going
Is there a reason why you guys don't tell us everything about what our powers do, like cooldown, base damage?
So, yeah, it's not so much that we don't want to. It's a matter of the fact that our tooltips could be better. And at this point, we're more or less we have to write those things out. And because it is actually text, it has to go through approvals in DC. So I mean, it's actually you think it would be easy to just change words, but it actually isn't. Yeah, well, it's not even, it's not necessarily his fault either. It's just we have we have to it has to be translated into multiple languages and stuff. So it is a bit of overhead we have to deal with. Trust me, I would love to show everything about a power.
Has there maybe a middle ground until you can get it implemented within game? Maybe having on the website a section that's just dedicated to each power set listing things to base damage.
Yeah, maybe as an app. I'm not sure. One of the issues game wise is UI too. That's always that's one of the things we're hoping once the UI is built, we'll be able to address much more easily. And give you a sure.
That's also a time issue, right? If we're updating those on there and then we make an update in the game, then we have to update that too. And at some point it becomes like, well, now it's out of scope.
Yeah. Chris, you had
When you guys find more efficient ways of doing things that you introduce tech, how often do you go back to like the Noah power sets and say, okay, if we had to do these workarounds and everything else like that, okay, now we have a new product that handles like 3 of the old ones. How often does that go back? Because we think that would create resources in earlier.
So believe it or not, that is another totally awesomely timed question because one of the procs being so important to how our games work. Up until now, we've more or less incorporated what a tank does in each individual power, which is super. It's super. It's sort of a heavy-handed way of doing it, but it was the only way we had to do it at the time. So basically, it's like if you're a nice guy, here's the 4 different things that can happen if you're in tank role. And we put those 4 things in every power. That's a lot of data duplication, and that's not super efficient at all. But as part of the proc improvements that were made this year, we finally got the ability to basically apply game effects just on power used. So we recently, a couple updates ago, just without it was relatively transparent until it broke this update. Yeah, we've done it, but Lars actually fixed it. We more or less moved all the tank related passives just into all the tank related stuff into one power rather than being in every power in your set plus all the iconic powers plus all the movement powers.
So basically, like in a taunt, instead of saying, hey, this is the proc for the fire taunt, this is the proc for the earth taunt, you say this is
taunt. Yes.
And then you go through it. And
yeah, it was actually worse than that. It's like there was a taunt in every power that could be tossed used by a tank.
Is that why certain is that why certain powers from other like power sets were like in DBS were taunting the bosses as well?
As far as old bugs, that would have been a situation where a lot of data duplication and like not having the proper predicate on there, right? That would be so basically the taunt is always there, and we're saying don't do the taunt unless you're a tank, right? So if somebody gets that wrong, then you're taunting when you're not a tank. And so there were a couple cases where the wrong predicate was on there, and so you were getting the taunt. And obviously with improvements in technology like this allow us to do things much more sanely. And so if we ever need to update anything, then we're just doing it in one place. It's much better. That being a good question,
You in the back.
you also get a insured.
Yeah, his hand up like the entire time.
But
Just recently, on the test server, you just updated Gadgets. And Gadgets has a new mechanic where you have multiple interactions before something else happens. Can you explain how you're tracking that?
Tags and predicate. I wish I had a picture of how we showed the ability in the editor.
Right.
All the Gadgets abilities double almost in size if they're included in that. So every time you use one of the abilities and hit somebody using another piece of tech that I did, of course, which was instigate game effects, which just means if I hit something, it knows that I'm the one that did it. So every time you hit somebody with a power interaction, you get tagged, on yourself, and then we keep track of those and which one it is. And then as you have gotten to 3, then there's this huge predicate. It's like, was it beast? Was it beast? Was it beast? And then finally, there's one of those also checking to see if you're doing it correctly. Then you also get power on one of those full game effects. So yeah, it is a ton of game effects, tags, and preference.
But it's per power, not for multiple.
Correct, because there's times on all the game effects, and then it's based on animation plus the amount of time.
Kind of follow up John's question there. When you guys are making new powers and everything, do you go back and look at, like the vanilla powers, like you said, with, some of the newer powers may make the vanilla powers kind of like irrelevant, for a specific role, like in comparison between the rage and fire tank?
yeah, so I mean, balance-wise, we try not to shift the balance of power too much. However, if for example, there's power is underperforming, then obviously we're going to go back and buff it up, right? Fire being one of those cases where at the time when we had done basically fire upgrades, it was more or less people were feeling that the amount of increase in power we were going to get to fire was actually too much, and so I actually sort of backed off away from where I thought it should be. And this was like the last fire update, like a year and a half.
GU23?
Larry knows these things. GU23. So that was I guess that was a long time ago. So anyway, fast forward to now, and we've scaled a little more in fire. Yeah, fire probably should have gotten closer to the buff we'd originally given it, and now it's evident that it didn't get that. So we'll fix it.
But we do actually, the new tech will allow us to fix issues with existing. Was it current backlash?
There's the power interaction in sorcery that gives healing when the dudes are attacking. Right? If you were at range, it didn't work at all. And so Ben's test case for the accumulator proc was that.
Yeah.
And he used that, he fixed that, and then said, hey, here it is, and then I can use it for Celestial.
So yeah, before we had all the guts of Celestial, we actually used that as not just a test case to get it to work, but also to make that ability work better. And these guys also will do sweeping changes too, where they'll go back, and a lot of times it might be just a minor blip in a release notes, or maybe not even because it doesn't have a functional change. Well, they'll re-implement massive numbers of abilities in a way that reduces the total number of game effects and delivery mechanisms that have to be on there, because they'll be easier to maintain after that.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And we're very often doing, basically just doing cleanup. And it's like, all right, we can finally streamline this, make this more sane, more manageable, and actually make it run better and be safer, basically. So.
My concern though is, with especially with fire, even since like launch, fire thing, like the secondary tank that everybody want to go for and all that. And when the Earth came along and they moved down and pulled again, and then Rage came along, and now it's like, if you're not ice or you're Rage, or even Earth, like people are not playing fire tanks
for any of,
Yeah, and like I said, part of that is because they didn't get the increase they should have gotten, right? And so we're gonna fix it. Okay, last one. Go ahead.
My question is, I know the mechanics, like for the 4-player, when you don't run with a healer, you get like a percentage buff. Would there ever be a case where with a trawler, with a POC, you could actually have like a little bit of a healer mechanic to it?
No, probably not, because controller, their deal is restoring power, right? So we wouldn't want to step on the healer's toes by giving the card there, because it would be just as, like having you heal as you do damage, or having you heal as the tank took damage, or whatever, right? It would be, that probably wouldn't be too popular, just favoring one role over the other to make, rules. So, all right, I guess that's all we have time for. Thank you.